This episode of the Get Fast podcast is brought to you by Trivelo Coaching, where we help triathletes and cyclists like you train smarter to race faster. I am one of your hosts, Jordan, and this is former Australian Ironman Champion, Gerard Donnelly. We all have those days where the thought of starting a training session seems daunting. You're either tired, flat, unmotivated, and getting a training session done seems like a distant dream. So in today's episode, we're going to talk about how to train when you just don't feel like it, and some tactics to help, and a little known secret about motivation that most people don't realize. So I'm looking forward to revealing that. But before that, as always, we're going to go through what's caught your attention, and normally we just do one thing each, but there's a few things that's caught our attention, so there's a few things this week that we need to talk about. We're going to start off with a bang, go into Strade Bianche, the first unofficial spring classic. It's not actually counted as a spring classic, but spring classics are back, and we're both very excited. We love talking about them on the podcast. There's always so many lessons to learn from pro cycling, even though we are a cycling and triathlon podcast. We just love these races, and I want to start with the female race because something happened in the race that I was pretty shocked at, and I want to get your opinions on the tactics of this. So with a couple of K to go, there was two girls in the lead who ended up coming first and second, and Borghini was left to do all the work on the front, while the girl behind her who ended up winning, Van den Broek Black, sat on her and did absolutely no work. And the commentators were saying she's doing no work because she has two teammates in the breakaway 30 seconds behind them. And I just couldn't understand why that mattered. I didn't understand why that gave her the right to not do any work. And, Borghini on the front was just doing all the work, tiring herself out. And of course, she got out sprinted because that was always going to happen. So what are your thoughts on that? Am I correct in saying that to question that? Is that because it just seems so,
It really doesn't, it defies logic. Yeah. And the nature of cycling team tactics is so complex, and there's so many factors that determine what's a good tactic and a mistake. And generally, when you have one rider and you are well represented in the break, as you said, they had three riders, and of course they had to throw out riders to attack. And the Italian champion Borghini chased down one of the attacks from the team that had three riders, and so Borghini's stuck with the rider she's riding with to the finish line. Could definitely throw that play that card of, I'm not going to help you because my better riders are behind me, and that's kind of the basis of her tactic. There's a world champion behind her, but she was actually a world champion, an ex-world champion herself, so she's no slouch as a rider, and Borghini knows that. Yeah. So in my opinion, if that's the card she's going to play, then Borghini has every right to question that and saying, don't you think you're good enough to win? That would be one, I would have a conversation, definitely.
Play some mind games.
Yeah. And I certainly wouldn't just sit on the front and just let it pan out like it did. I would attempt to sit up, and if you know the finish section well, there are a couple of little steep bits, and as we saw in the men's race, Van der Poel attacked on a downhill at the end and got a little gap. So I would have tried a few of those tactics just to make the other rider think for a start, and to take some energy away from her legs, so that she may, if she has to do another little effort, how do we know what state she's in? It might be one more effort and that'll do her, and she's done. No one knows that. So just to stay on the front and let her have a free ride? Yeah. No,
it just panned out so scripted that she just buried herself in the front for the last however many kilometres.
And the reason she did that is she, in her mind, is going, well, there's two riders here. I'm a chance of coming first and second. And she's probably backing herself that she'll beat Van den Broek Black
is, it's a tongue twister.
in the final. But as it turned out, she was progressively getting tighter, and Van den Broek Black was actually recovering beautifully just to launch, the predictable attack. So Borghini's kind of got a second, rather than possibly a third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth. So she's guaranteed second by doing that. So that would be her in her mind. I'll stuff it. I'm either going to get first or second, rather than sitting up and potentially letting 8 more riders have a crack at the podium. But, how much value do you place on first compared to second? Your first or your nowhere is some of the tactics that I would be using. It's great to come second in a race like that. It's one of the classic races of all time, and it will be a bigger race down the track. It's only a young race, and look, there's monuments, that are called monuments. So I think Strade Bianche should be a monument. Yeah. It's only been going for 17 years or something. Before that, it was a ride where people came out dressed in olden gear, and it was like a fun day, and it's turned into this epic race.
So you personally would have risked going back to the chasing group?
I don't know if I'd risk that. Yeah. I would risk playing some different tactics, which could cause the other group to catch up. Yeah. But I would be really conscious of not letting that happen, because I still want to get first or second.
You wouldn't sit up, and you wouldn't.
No, I definitely wouldn't sit up. No, I would be trying other things before that. That would be my last.
Because if you sit up and have a conversation, and then they look at you,
10 seconds gone.
And they look at you and go, "I'm not doing anything." And you,
and you've lost your advantage.
Yeah,
yep. And look, the advantage the other team had was if they get caught, the next rider launches. Yeah. Because all the other riders in the peloton were chasing, and the other 2 riders of that teammate were sitting on. So, there's a lot in the tactics of cycling, of team racing.
Yeah.
And look, that I don't think she made that big an error, but she still ended up with second. But I think she should have made it harder for the victory.
Yeah. And in the men's category, obviously Van der Poel's Van der Poel. The amount of Vanders there are across the male and female is Van der Poel, and there's Wout van Aert. And
yes,
his performance was exceptional. And
it was. I've never seen a rider dominate the race like that, and I think Alaphilitte's one of the greatest riders we've had for a long time. He's in the class of Sagan, and you can rattle through all the previous world champions, and Alaphilippe is right up there, and he's got an explosive kick, and Van der Poel made him look second rate twice, and that's kind of shocking to see that. But looking at his profile of the power that he rode a very clever race. And Wout van Aert, I was as the race was unfolding, and I actually watched it more than once.
You're the only person I know that would watch a 4-hour race more than once.
And he spent a lot of time on the front, unnecessarily. And Mathieu van der Poel, he timed his efforts better than Van Aert. Van Aert kept the pressure on and caused the race to split. His team tactics enabled them to have the best 7 riders in the world. You had the world champion, ex-world champion, Tour de France champion, national champion, and then you had Goggle was the other guy who has actually come in the top 10 at Strade Bianche before, but
no disrespect to Goggle.
That's right. He's a very good rider.
I've never seen Goggle before, but
but the commentator, that was a pretty funny joke, I thought. But but the class of rider that was in that final group was like you're going to watch a movie and you're seeing the race pan out just exactly as you want it. And don't underestimate how well Simon Clarke rode. And, to finish in the top 10 in that race and beat Fulsang at the end, he didn't get much of a mention in the race. And that was outstanding. And he is one of the all-time great classic riders, Simon Clarke. Yeah. And he doesn't get the accolade, in my opinion, that he deserves. And
he's had such good performances, hasn't he?
Yeah, some of his one-day one-day classic races. He's, Milan San Remo was in the top 10 last year. Right there in the sprint. He wasn't there in the sprint for this one. Just terrific to see an Aussie. And Michael Power was also in the bunch. Yeah. So there were 2 Aussies in that top 14. Which was a split bunch. Yeah. And the bunch chasing. Yeah. Fulsang was doing his nut because he couldn't get the guys to help. to get back on, he was caught out. He made a mistake and got caught out. So tactics were flying everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. No, you're right. It's great to see a top 10 Aussie in Simon Clark in 9th, and then Amanda Spratt was 12th in the female. So 9th and 12th were our best performances, which is from pretty good.
Yeah, Amanda Spratt's a consistent performer at that level. Yeah. It's fantastic.
If you couldn't see my face then because you were listening to audio, I was sarcastic pretty good. It's unbelievable. You know?
That's right.
I wanted to ask, though, about Van der Poel's cyclocross background and what you think about this, because we see tons of gun riders come across from cyclocross, and there's just this thing about either a cyclocross background or a track background where they produce incredible cyclists, and it's...
Do you know the key thing? And look, the commentator, he was really... I can't remember which one it was, but he'd done his research, and he rattled off Alaphilippe, Van der Poel, Van Aert, etc., etc. They all had come from some sort of cross training, whether it was gravel bike or whether it was mountain bike or track.
Cadel Evans was that?
All of them. All of the guys in that group, except Goggle, I think.
You're making that up?
I'm making that up, yeah. No one knows who he is. Yeah. But they all came from a background. And the key thing, which we talk about a lot, is pressure on the pedals. And a lot of the bunch riding in cycling is not pressure on the pedals. But in mountain biking or gravel riding or any of that cross training, you're just forever doing over-under efforts. And when you're on the under, you're not actually on the under. You're still having to pedal because you're on a flat section where you're potentially by yourself, because they're almost like time trials. The other sport we're talking about is like time trialing, and ironically, this is what we push. We push threshold training, pressure on the pedals, and we use our over-under high-intensity bunch riding as part of our program. And people keep saying, it's because they ride mountain bike. Well, what is it in mountain biking or gravel riding or that style of bike riding that enables them to be really good road riders and track riding? It's because they're used to having pressure on the pedals all the time. It's like we talked about runners. You can either keep up or you can't in a running race. There's no freewheeling in a running race. If you can't keep the pace, you drop off instantly. That time trial style of racing or training is what makes you a better cyclist.
So my next question on that was, do you think it is equivalent to hill running for runners in the strength training, by going to the hills and running really steep ups and downs? Is that the equivalent to cyclocross, and why it could create such a good benefit for triathletes?
Well, the next step is cross country. That's what I think it's like. It's like cross country and the downhills. You're striding out, and the eccentric contraction you're feeling when you're running fast, and that can be fartlek training, hill running, but cross country racing is as close as you'll ever get to what a mountain bike experience is, because whether you're going on the flat, up or down, you have to keep the pressure on the pace you're running at. You don't get to roll down a hill as a runner. So you've just got constant. It's the time trialing of threshold training that we're talking about that everybody avoids, because guess what? It's painful and hard. So why would you want to front up and do that? Once every 3 weeks to do a threshold style event, because, you're basically riding at your maximum for as long as you can.
It's grueling. Well, yeah, that's it's interesting to think about how, exactly what we've said, that the amount of top riders that come from that background, it's definitely something to think about in these training programs, and why you say that we implement this style of training in our training programs. Next thing that's caught our attention, and this is, both of us kind of have picked this up, is a lot of athletes wanting to be too many things. And what we mean by that is, we talk a lot on this podcast about having an A race, and you say pick your A race, and some athletes come to you wanting to pick 2 A races and sometimes close to each other, and you would say that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I feel like we keep flogging this dead horse a bit, but it's got to be said, when you come with the mindset that, right, this is the race that I want to do, and you're totally focused on that. And the example could be, I want to swim the English Channel. I want to run a 50k ultra marathon. I want to do peaks through, 9-hour cycling race. And then you say, but I also want to do something quite obscure, like I want to improve my running, but I'm training for 3 peaks. And they're just not complementary to each other. And I'm all for picking as many goals as you like, but you've got to understand at the end of the day that you are going to compromise one of them, and you end up compromising both. So if you need, let's just use the English Channel swimming event, you need to swim a lot of endurance. And if you start running, you could end up taking time away from your swimming program and potentially being sore, potentially having hamstrings and soreness in quads and calves and et cetera, et cetera. It might complement it a little bit, but it is a bit of a clash. The idea of doing a triathlon half Ironman against 3 peaks, they're both, you can do both of them, but you will not be good at either of them. You'll be average. You won't do a PB at peaks if you're training for an Ironman at the same time. And at the same time, you won't do a PB at the Ironman training for peaks. So you're going to be average at the end of the day. And if you understand that that's what's going to happen and you're happy, then that's okay. But don't be unhappy when you don't perform the way you want to. So getting confused about having too many A races that are too close to each other, we have talked about, I'm sure. And that's why I feel like we're repeating ourselves. But that keeps coming up where people keep putting other events too close to their A race and wonder why they're not actually getting the result they want.
I have heard you say that sentence, and I heard you say it last week, which is why it came up again. But you say, do you want to be average at both, or do you want to be good at one? And people say, well, I want to be good at both. And you say, well, it's not an option. I'm sorry, it's not on the table. Yeah. It's a nice dream, but it's not on the table, and that's a kind of a harsh reality to face.
Yeah, but the conflict's there. Yeah. And they do, doing exercise will complement everything. Yeah. But it won't enable you to achieve, for example, if you're doing peaks, we'll use the peaks example. It's 4,500 metres of climbing. So most of your training is involved around riding hills. Long endurance training with hills with some intensity to get your FTP to improve. But in between, you need to recover. So if you're training for the Ironman or 70.3, in between the recovery you're supposed to be doing for peaks, you're swimming and running. So where's the recovery? So you're going to get really tired and not train well for 3 peaks because your fatigue level is too high. And the same is going to go for the 70.3. You're actually not swimming and running properly because you're so tired from the riding training in the hills that you're doing. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to get a result that's going to be your PB. And that's as simple as I can make it. Yeah, and
another reason I wanted to bring it up was because you had a group of triathlon athletes approach you and say, right, these are our athletes that we did the nationals that we spoke about a few weeks ago. We all want to do the Melbourne to Warney. What was your reaction to that? And without going into personal detail, how do you approach that conversation? Because it is a drastically different event, a 30-minute time trial, 40-minute time trial to a 250 or 270 kilometre.
265.
265, yeah. Yep.
I know exactly how far it is. But they were also training for a road race and a criterium and a team's time trial and individual time trial. So they do have the base for an event, and it is 9 weeks apart. So they are a little bit different, and because of the way we bring our program through, we do keep the endurance ride in part of the program anyway. So now we've got 9 weeks just to add to that endurance. So it's definitely possible. Whereas if it was in 3 weeks' time or 2 weeks' time, I'd be saying, you're dreaming. Forget it. You don't have the endurance base to do it. But they have an opportunity. So that's an example of giving yourself enough time and understanding who the athlete is. Yep. And a couple of people have said, oh, that sounds a great idea. And I've said to them, unfortunately for you, whatever your name is, I'm not going to say, this is not the event for you this year. You need a lot more. Melbourne to Warrnambool is not a race that you go into because it sounds like a fun thing to do. It's one of the most brutal races I've ever ridden.
Yeah. Great. That's great clarification. Next caught your attention, the sheep mentality. Explain to me the sheep mentality that caught your attention again.
And I do feel like we do talk a lot in our podcast about this, but it definitely needs to be reiterated, is because I don't know how many examples I can give here. If 100 people all line up to queue for something over the other side of the road, you will look across there and go, what are they queuing up for? It must be something exciting that there's that many people queuing up for it. And you would find, if you went and asked a percentage of the people in the queue, what are you queuing up for? I'm not sure, but all these other people are queuing up and I don't want to miss out. So that's kind of an introduction into the sheep mentality, doing exactly what other people are doing without a good enough reason. And so the Peaks event has the execution is just as equally important in a 10-hour event as it is in a 20-minute FTP or an 800. In the 800, if everybody in your heat runs the first, and you're trying to run 2 minutes, we use that example because people in the podcast know that that's something that we've aspired to do.
People will know the 2-minute times intimately.
That's
now.
right.
Yeah.
And I'll use this example because it makes sense. 4 times 200 at 30 seconds will give you 2 minutes. And if you run one of them under 30 seconds, you'll get 1:59. So at the start of an 800, I've watched this week in, week out for 3 years while you've been trying to break this record.
For 50 years probably.
Yeah, and seeing the first 200 run at 24 seconds or 25 or 26 seconds. And because you're in a group of 8 people, you don't want to feel awkward and be 10 metres off the back. So the sheep mentality is, I'll just keep up with these guys, they must know what they're doing. Well, actually, they don't know what they're doing. They're running a completely poorly executed race. Because what you want to do is get there in 30 seconds in the first 200, not 24 or 25. And then when it comes to the 600 metre mark to get to the finish, they're all running 34, 35, 36. Whereas if you stayed 10 metres off the back and came through in 30 seconds, you would catch them all and pass them in the most important part, which is the last 50 metres, which is exactly what you did. So the sheep mentality keeps rearing its head. In 3 Peaks, it happened as well. And it's happened to me when I did 3 Peaks, and I told the riders from Triathlon, this is what's going to occur when you hit the base of Mount Beauty at the start of Tawonga Gap, which is the first climb in the 3 Peaks event. You will be passed by pretty much 3/4 of the field. And everybody thinks that's the pace to go at because everybody's riding at that pace. But don't join them. Don't join the sheep. You stick with your power numbers that are going to get you up that climb, up Hotham and up Falls with the same power. And if we did a survey, the people who rode past you, say they rode at 90% of their FTP up Tawonga and you were sticking to your 75 to 80, I guarantee if you looked at their power numbers on Falls Creek, it wouldn't be 90%, it would be 40 to 50 to 60%, and it could be 20 because the majority of them are walking. And that's what the sheep mentality does. You follow people who don't have a clue about what they're doing, and just because a lot of people are doing it, it means that it's right. Well, it's okay to be the minority because sometimes the minority is correct. And in this case, they all rode the power on all 3 climbs very similar in the Triathlon group. First climb, second climb, third climb. And they were passing truckloads of people on the second and third climb that had already passed them on the first climb. So the sheep mentality keeps rearing its head. It's like a broken record. I just can't believe people keep doing the same mistake. And that is the definition of insanity, isn't it? Repeating the same mistake and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah. The reason I brought it up again and why it keeps rearing its head is because we were talking about 3 Peaks after the weekend, and you said that the athletes, you gave them a plan, they did exactly what you just said, they were passing people and they were calling you up afterwards saying it was incredible, we were just passing people constantly, and you knew that was going to happen, you told them it was going to happen, it did happen, they told you it happened, but it just happens year after year. And we spoke about the fact that you've been telling me this since I was a kid, you've been experiencing it your whole athletic career. But no matter what, it just keeps happening. And no matter how experienced people are, it just keeps happening. And we were just kind of on the phone astounded that more people don't pick it up, And even last week, I was at a 5,000 metre track event, which was a really great event. It had a lot of Australia's best runners there. And there were some really fast 5,000 metre heats running around. But in a 5,000 meters, in an 800, you can sprint out in 25, 26, and you will suffer in the last 50 meters, 100 meters, and you will lose a second or two. But it's exaggerated over a 5,000 meter event on the track. And I watched race after race go off, and the first group would go through in 30, 32, 33 seconds when they needed to be running 36, 37, 38 seconds for 200. And that just hurts a whole lot more 4K into the event on the track. And there's packs of runners running in the last K, 40 second, 42, 45, 48 second, 200 meters because they've just absolutely blown up. And
physiologically, it's evidence based. It's not it is a tactic.
It's not an opinion.
Yeah, it's you are increasing your heart rate, increasing your lactate, which is going to prevent you from running well or performing well. It doesn't have to be a running race. It doesn't matter. And look, that example you gave is exactly the worst case scenario. Is I remember running the Melbourne Marathon. It used to start at Frankston and finished in the City Square. And, on the start line, you had guys who could run in, probably 2:15, 2:20 would be the best runners there. It's not a world class event, so you're not having 2:08s and 2:06 runners, but there's still very, very good runners, elite runners. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking 3 or 4 of them can run at that pace. And then there might be 10 runners who can run between 2:20 and 2:30. And there might be 30 runners who can run between 2:30 and 2:35, etc., etc. And the masses start to grow. But on the start line, in the first K, there's still a bunch of 70 runners after a K in the marathon. Why? Why is there still a bunch of 70 runners? There should only be 3.
Yeah.
At the first K mark, there should only be 3.
Yeah.
And the next group of runners should be 20 seconds behind them according to their pace that they're going to run.
Yeah.
And this happened year in, year out. I did a few Melbourne marathons, and I would look around on the start line and see, I know that guy there, he had the headband, and he did it every year. And I used to search for his result, and he'd run his first 5K in, really good time of 18 minutes something, and his last 5K was 30 minutes. Yeah. And he ended up running a split that was like, 1 hour 30, looking at a 3-hour marathon, and then his second split was 2 hours. So he ended up doing 2.5 hours. 3.5 hours instead of running sensibly. Yeah. But it was just the sheep mentality. Yeah. Just run.
Approximate times, but I know what you're saying. It's just like it's exaggerated. The
longer the event. Yeah, and it's a long time to be in agony for. Yeah. Whereas at an 800, you can put up for 50 metres, but try doing it for 6 hours in an event like Peaks where you've hit the wall. Yeah. It's not an experience you want to go through, believe me.
Yeah. And there is, genuine social studies on what you were talking about at the start, the people queuing up. They did used to do studies where they would just make queues and see if people would just join, and people did. And there was one study that was so fascinating. This is a bit off topic, but they would get people in a waiting room and they would make sure that there was only one person in there to start, and then there would be a person at the desk with a bell, and then the next stranger that walked in, the person at the desk would ring the bell, and then the person in the chair would stand up. And so the person that walked in would stand next to them and stand still, and then they'd ring the bell again, and the actor, so to say, would sit down. And so the person who didn't know they were part of a social experiment would sit down. And then the next stranger that walked in, they take a seat. They'd ring the bell again, and then both people stood up. So the third person that comes in stands up, and they do it to see how many people they can get to come in. And they fill a room with 8 to 10 people, all in the waiting room, standing up and sitting down.
With no verbal instruction.
Exactly, yeah. No one said that they have to do that, and just because the first person saw it, and the more people that did it, everyone else thinks and it's so funny on camera because you see people kind of looking around going, well, I guess I should do it because everyone stood up, and it's this, it is the sheep mentality to AT. So anyway, moving on from that topic, takes us to our very big topic of the day, the thing we want to finish off with, which is tactics with struggling with motivation. And give me your gold secret of information that you wish everyone would know when it comes to motivation.
Well, the gold secret is that you can't be motivated the whole time. And once you understand that concept, that 100% is not achievable. Let's face it, there's periods where, as motivated as I am, as a athlete, I have periods where I'm 80% motivated, or 60, or 20, or 0. So that is normal, and everybody out there needs to hear that. And if you feel zero motivation, then you need to create tactics that enable you to get training. And that's the key point, that it's normal to experience highs and lows in a program that you've set yourself a target for an A race. So say you're sitting here saying, or at the start of the year, like, I want to do the Noosa Triathlon, and it's November, and you've got the journey from the start of the year to November to get yourself as well prepared to do the race as well as you can. But that's a long time. That's 10 or 11 months. So there's going to be highs and lows in your motivation along that journey. And the message is, that's normal. That's okay. You're not the only one who experiences that. But the key thing is, what am I going to do about that? How am I going to get myself? And they're the things that we talk about now, is the tactics.
And that's, on that note, it's so imperative that people know that, because when you can easily fall into the trap of isolating yourself and thinking that you're the only one that's going through it, and falling into that trap because you see everyone on Strava training really well. We talk about consistency all the time on this podcast, so you feel the pressure to be consistent. You know, the coach says you need to be more consistent, and so when you're not, you really beat yourself up thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I not motivated? But when you understand that everyone is going through it, and literally everyone, even the best athletes that you think, and everyone's somewhere on the motivation spectrum. Some people are 100% right now and they're flying, and then other people are at 10%. Then it's easier to be kinder to yourself about it and reassess and go through tactics. And before we go through the tactics, I mean, it has to be said that there might be situations where tactics aren't going to help because you simply haven't got the passion for what you're trying to do anymore. And this is a big thing that you say a lot, is you ask people, do you still want to do this? You know, overall, do you still want to do this? And if they don't, you say, well, stop. You know, don't think that I'm going to push you to do it when you don't want to do it. You know, there's just no way.
And people get shocked when I say, they're expecting me to say, oh, come on, Jordan, you can do this, you need to, and I'm encouraging you to do it. Well, I'm not a believer in that. I want the individual to have the inner drive themselves, have the passion and the desire and the love of what they're doing to motivate them. They're the ones who selected the goal. I didn't push the goal onto them. They've come to me and said, this is what I want to achieve. I want you to help me get to that point at the end of this program. And so you're the one that has to actually come up with, what am I doing this for? The why. And if you can't actually answer that, then you need to question, should I be doing it? And we did talk about this earlier in a podcast. Mm-hmm. But it needs to be said that I'm not going to be that person to talk you into something. If you don't have the love and the passion for what you're doing, then you actually need to not do it. And I've had a couple of conversations just recently about that with people who are quite shocked that I've said, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up. If you've lost the desire for it, you're being not true to yourself by continuing on the journey that you're not enjoying. Yeah. So there's a difference between just losing a little bit of motivation and a little bit of direction, as compared to, I actually don't want to do this anymore. I shouldn't have picked this. This is too hard. It's impacting too much on my work, my life, my family. And they're different reasons. So I just think you just really need to think really clearly about what is it that's the reason why you're doing this. And once you've established that, then the motivation and what to do and how to do it is really easy. Yeah,
the tactics will work if that's what you want, but they won't do anything.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. And the flip side to this coin is that you don't want to also fall into the trap of questioning your own passion just because you're feeling not motivated. So if you're in that slump of, it might be a week or two where you're really not feeling motivated, you go, oh, do I really want this? And then you're not saying quit then, because you might still really want it. You're just not feeling motivated right now. So you can try a bunch of these things.
The usual thing that I've done with you guys and your brothers and sisters, is, okay, I don't think you should do that anymore. And once something's taken away from you, the fear of missing out on that is enormous. So I actually said this today to one of the customers who's had a bad injury and he's questioning whether he should be doing it. And I said, well, if you can't ever ride your bike again, will you be happy? Because he's thinking about not doing, because it's risky, it's dangerous. And he's going, I haven't really thought about it like that. If I can't ever ride again, I'm not sure about that. But I want to have a choice. Well, I'm saying if the choice was taken away from you, that will really determine how passionate you are about it. And I use myself as the example. Someone said to me, when you turn 40-something, you'll never run again. I'll just laugh. I'd say, no, that's not a possibility. But that's actually kind of what's happened. And I would have, I would just given everything if that was going to be the future to prevent that from happening. I'm still trying to prevent that from happening, trying all different tactics to enable myself to actually jog or run again, because I love the passion and the feeling I get as a runner. I just love that. And it's something that should be a normal activity. But the minute it's taken away from you, you want it more. And I think that's a really good point that, say to yourself, have I got the passion for this? Or if I can never do this again, would I be unhappy? And if the answer is yes, then you still want to do it. It's just that you're in a motivational.
Yeah. Because you don't want to do yourself a disservice by every time you're feeling unmotivated, taking a break or being inconsistent, because that's just going to lead to inconsistent training and you're just never going to get the results you want. So, and
that's why the tactics are the actual answer to. But you've got to establish which one you're on, which track you're on first. So let's go through some of the tactics. And something you've done with the athletes, especially over the COVID period, is replace some training sessions with something more fun and more motivational, which is, for example, a Zwift race. Yeah, and you got to think outside the box a little bit when you're really, really struggling. And look, we have say the program that you've got is 6 months to your A race, and in that journey you've got Tuesday, just pick a cyclist, Tuesday hard, Thursday hard, Saturday endurance, Sunday at sub-threshold, some easy rides, and then some tempo. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday is it's going to be a hard day, and you're questioning whether you can actually do them. They're that hard. What tactics can you use that give you the same result of the intensity, but you don't feel like you're doing a training session? So doing a race is one of those things. And I'm not saying do 5 races. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying use one of the days of intensity, and that's what we did during COVID. We threw in a race, and once people understood what we were doing it for the socialising, for the interaction, for the motivation of being as competitive beasts, training by yourself against power is a competition, but training against other humans is a better competition. And all of a sudden, you've replaced one of your hard sessions out of the 3 with some fun. And that means you only have to do one training session on Tuesday or Thursday, whatever day it is, whereas the other one is a competition. And then if in COVID you can't ride with the bunch, so join a group ride on Zwift, which is what we did. We joined a long endurance group ride and we made it a competition. So it wasn't a race, but it was, we were having to hold 3 hours worth of power just like we would as an endurance ride. The purpose and goal of the session was achieved. But we used a tactic to get ourselves around it. And then, the Sunday session during COVID, I'm using these examples, where we were still indoors, to ride sub-threshold, let's just not ride that on another flat ride. Let's go up a hill and ride it at low cadence, get some strength work out of it as well as the sub-threshold. So they're little tactics that you can throw in, and all of a sudden 6 months went by where everybody was riding out of their skins from and didn't feel like they'd lost motivation. In fact, they couldn't wait for the next week for the next race and the next Saturday endurance ride on Zwift, and they were really good things that we threw in that enabled people to keep their goals alive. And as we found out when it opened up in November, December, January, February, March, most of the Trivelo people are flying. So that's one tactic.
Yeah, an easy little trick that you always put it very simply, is just, and there's a few things to this, but the principle is just get your socks on.
Yeah.
And
we do that saying a lot, don't we?
It's just...
I've got a couple of guys who I would text to say, have you got your socks on? And most people go, what are you talking about? So the first step in getting ready for your session is to get dressed. So the minute you put your socks on, there's no going back. You're on your journey towards the session. So I would send a picture to Sean with my socks. I would just take a picture of my feet with my socks on, and he would know that I'm about to start my session. So that was a little motivation tactic that we were using between each other. And, we both knew it was a damn hard session coming up, and he knew that I had my socks on. And he would say, that photo, I went and got ready and jumped on the bike because I knew you were on.
You're not even riding together. You're just both getting on the trainer.
That's right. Yep. So it's just little things like that where you can use friendship groups, and there's no doubt in my mind that I maintain my motivation by these tactics, and I struggle with motivation just like everybody else. But by using, and I've got a whole lot more that we're going to go through, but that's one of the ones that I think it makes me laugh every time I think of it, because. Yeah,
and you taught me that, and I still use it, to this day, where I might just lie in my bed or something, or lie on the couch, which is a big mistake because you're just avoiding this session, and you're just so tired sometimes, and you just can't think of anything worse than
delay.
You delay it, and I just say to myself, just get your shoes on, and I actually trick myself to the point where I say, just get your shoes on. If you still don't feel like it, you don't have to run, and. No matter how many times, once my shoes are on, I'm going for a run. But I still say to myself, you don't have to run. It's okay. It's like you're coaching yourself, Just get your shoes on, and then if you're still feeling a little bit tired, you can not run. And it never happens once your shoes are on. But extending that tactic of just getting your socks on, that mindset of if you're stuffed, you don't want to do a hard session, just go for an active run.
We say this all the time.
Just go for a zone 2.
Yeah. If your session's Tuesday and it's supposed to be the hardest session you've got on the week's program, and you genuinely are exhausted, then consistency is king. So get your socks on, jump on the bike, and roll around at 50%, and for 15 minutes. What a waste of time that is. Absolutely not. You've got blood flow happening. You've got recovery. Endorphins released from exercising, cardiac, your heart's getting worked. So many good things, so many positive things. And I bet you get off the bike thinking, oh, I'm glad I did that. And sometimes halfway through it, oh, this isn't so bad. I might actually start the session. And before you know it, you've sucked yourself into doing a session without realising it. And I know myself that I'm going to do that. If I just get started, I won't do the session. I've already said that to myself. I won't do the session. And 15 minutes in, I actually feel all right.
Yeah.
I'll just start the session.
Yeah.
And before I know it, and I'm so wrapped at the end that I've actually gone through and I've actually nailed it.
Yeah.
And what a journey that is from, the session's an hour 20 and it's been a 2-hour mind game.
Yeah.
And I'm telling the listeners this because that's what I've gone through. It's what you've gone through. And it's normal to have to experience it, because if it was easy to get to your race goal, everybody would be doing the same. Thousands and thousands, millions of people would be just, I'll just do that race. But the journey is harder than the actual event sometimes. The journey to get to the event, which probably leads to the next tactic.
Well, I had my own point, but you can.
Go on.
Okay, well, I don't know what you wanted next. I was going to say it's context dependent, and we spoke about this where sometimes I am struggling to do the hard sessions, because they're really tough, they're grueling, and you just know they're going to hurt. So sometimes I struggle with the motivation for that. But other times I'm really enjoying the tough sessions, and I'm struggling to do the easy sessions because they're boring or they're just slow, and you're getting excited by the hard sessions or even races, and then going for a long, slow 1 hour jog or a 1 hour 30 zone 2 pedaling. It just sounds horrible. And so depending on which one you're struggling with depends on how you try and trick yourself. And that
look, I've got some ridiculous tactics with my recovery rides. Like I would try to ride, because Zwift doesn't have lap power, it only has 3-second power. So because we pedal so poorly. It's hard to hold 100 watts.
I'm going to highlight this and say that this is under the category of Dad's weird tactics, because you have some super weird tactics. And if people want to incorporate these, then great. But you tell us.
So one of the ones I'm concentrating on is 100 RPM, 100 watts, and 100 heart rate. I call it the 100 session.
Yeah.
So it's a recovery session, and I'm trying to sit the power at exactly 100 watts and take a photo of the three at 100.
Yeah.
And, obviously, if you're...
That works for you because...
I'm just using these numbers as an example.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I would say I want to hold 160 watts, but I don't want to see anything below 155 on Zwift or 165. I have to be pedaling, and I don't want to see my heart rate creep more than 5 beats. And so I'm concentrating on the line, concentrating on the power number, trying to pedal as smoothly as I can so that I don't go over the number. And before I know it, I'm concentrated so much on such an irrelevant thing, which is actually quite relevant to the session because it's keeping me right in the zone where I should be. But I'm concentrating so hard on that, all of a sudden the session's flying through. And it is a tactic that I don't find the recovery ride board. People go, it's just so boring. But I know the actual purpose and goal of it is so helpful to the rest of my program that I'm going to attack it with a tactic that's going to keep me concentrating in what I should be doing, and using Zwift for that ride where there's people potentially sitting on me, and when we come to a hill, I'll stay at my 1.5 watts per kilo at 150 watts, and they will, ride the hill hard, and all of a sudden they'll soft pedal over the top of the hill, and all of a sudden I'm flying back past them. I'm still riding 1.5 watts per kilo at 150 watts, and I just funny seeing people yo-yo backwards and forwards. So that keeps my attention, as to the minor details. I'm talking minor details which actually contribute to my concentration.
It's just ways of tricking yourself.
It is, for sure.
And again, these things, you're not doing that every single session, although I know you do a lot of that for the recovery sessions, but this is for when you're not motivated. When you're motivated, I find recovery sessions really enjoyable. When you're in that mode where you're just loving training, everything's easy. I don't need any distraction, or I don't need any games to get through. And
I also think, far out, thank God this is an easy day today. I can just relax, and man, I've got a smile on my face, and I'm just rolling around. Yeah. And of course, that I don't use the stationary trainer. I use the rollers for my recovery day. So I'm practicing balancing. I'm sitting up with no hands, trying to ride, standing up out of the seat, trying to balance on the rollers. So it's a day to have some fun, and I'm still getting, because I'm on the rollers, I'm still getting that feel of the road, because you have to concentrate all the time, otherwise you're off. Which has happened. So there's a whole lot of little things I'm doing where I'm not making it easy by riding the recovery on the stationary trainer. And look, I sometimes, because where we live in the Dandenongs, for those who know the Dandenongs, it's just up and down. There is no flat section. I can't ride more than 100 metres without going up or down. So how am I going to do a recovery ride? I have to drive somewhere to do a recovery ride. So I use the rollers indoors as my recovery ride, and so time efficient as well. So they're little tactics I'm using because it doesn't take time. And I'm on the rollers, and I'm still using Zwift on the rollers, even though I can't feel the hills. But I'm using the Ant Plus dongle, and I'm still on Zwift.
And on that point, I haven't got the excuse. I live in a flat area, so I try and do my recovery rides go outside on the flat, because I do like being outside and riding around. But sometimes when the motivation's not there, I'd rather distract myself and go on to the trainer and either be on Zwift, which is a bit more distracting, or literally I'll just put something on the TV, and so I can just kind of pedal easily watching. And again, it's just a tactic. But coming back to the context dependent thing, the tactic can kind of differ depending on what you're struggling with. So the hard session tactic you said before about just do a session easy, just get on, just do 15 minutes easy. I've used that plenty of times, and I can say I've never just done 15 minutes. Every time you warm up, you do the session. And even though I know that, it's still okay to trick myself, because if I just did 15 minutes, that would be okay.
Still, yes.
Yeah, I'm not...
Yeah, but I'm here now, so I might as well do it properly.
Yeah, and it's important to know that if you just do the 15 minutes...
Yeah, there's two options there. Yeah. It's okay to do 15 minutes and get off.
Yeah, and even though it's never actually happened, if it happens one day, it's okay. And that's actually how it works when you trick yourself, because you do believe it when you say... if I still feel crappy after 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I'm getting off.
Yep, that's the rule. And I have done it many times where I've just stayed at recovery for the whole hour. I've not got off at 15 minutes,
exactly.
But I've just stayed recovery.
Yeah.
And I felt better afterwards.
Yeah.
And I actually performed better the next day.
Yeah.
So, it was a win-win.
Yeah.
And it still enabled me to keep the consistency trick, which we could talk about as another tactic.
Yeah, is that the one you wanted to bring up?
No, that's one I just thought about then, but it's not the one I was thinking about before.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go with it?
Go with it, yeah.
I know Moneghetti did, I think, a tactic of I'm going to run consecutive days for, I don't know, he did tell us.
Yeah, I can't remember what
I think
it was
it
either.
more than 1,000 days.
Yeah.
So he was at airports and he'd have to unpack his bag and run around the airport, and he was in obscure places where,
wouldn't miss a day.
He'd arrive at 9:30, being on the plane for, 18 hours, and he had 2 more hours before the midnight struck, and he had to get dressed and go for a run. And that's a tactic that, making yourself accountable to others. Have you broken your 1,000 days in a row? No, I haven't. And you're going to keep training. Some of it's a little bit silly, but it's a really good tactic to keep you accountable, because someone will ask you, if you tell someone a ridiculous thing, they will definitely try to catch you out. That's what human nature is. I'm going to do, 50 sit-ups every day for the next year, and someone's going to ask me, am I still doing it? And you don't want to say, no, I failed on that one. So, I'm not going to eat chocolate for a whole year. And, inevitably you have to say, oh, I had some. So they're little tactics to make you accountable. And if you're a person who's got pride, you won't give that up.
Consistency breeds motivation. So the more consistent you are, you'll find you're more motivated, because when you've done 3 or 4 weeks in a row of training, you don't want to miss a day, even if you haven't told anyone, because you go, I'm just on such a streak at the moment, I don't want to miss a day. And then as soon as you miss a day, you start letting yourself miss more days. So once you break it, start again, and then try and get your streak back up again.
Well, we do know that 30 days makes a habit. So, and I'm forever texting, and I shouldn't do this because it's against my principle, but I feel if someone's struggling, I'll say, well done, Brad, 7 green ticks in a row. And instantly they are motivated. Oh, that's good. I'm going to try and do that again. And if you can get 30 greens in a row, then you're on your journey. And that's motivation. Just aspire to get training peaks. What am I talking about, green ticks? Training peaks has green ticks if you do a session that's loaded for you on a particular day. And there are other colours, but if you have a red, it means you've missed. You can have orange, yellow, or green, and that's still. But I make the rule; it has to be green, which means you have to do the time that's given.
Yeah. One of the last couple of ones. Was there another one you're going to say?
No.
You go for the next one.
Well,
there's too many. We just keep stumbling over each other.
Well, I think the one thing that the key one that I use, which I don't know whether you want to talk about this now, is putting myself on race day. And that's the biggest motivator for me. So if I'm feeling crap in November and my race is in March during a period, all I have to do is go, what am I going to feel like on March the 28th when my race arrives? The night before, what am I going to feel like? What am I going to feel like when I stand on the beach if I'm a triathlete, or on the start line as a runner, or I'm hovered over my bike ready for the race that I'm about to do? Am I satisfied with the preparation? Have I done everything in my power to enable me to have the best day of my life on my A race that I've spent 6 or 9 months preparing for? So in that November, when I'm sitting there thinking, well, I put my socks on, all I have to do is think about race day and race night, the night before. Am I shitting myself the night before because I haven't prepared properly, or am I really happy with myself? And looking back going, well, there is nothing more I could have done to prepare myself as well as I can. And that is the biggest motivator for me. There's no doubt in my mind. If I'm struggling, put my mind straight to race day, and you bet that I'm on the bike, or I'm putting my running shoes on, I'm going for a run, or I'm jumping in the pool for a swim.
I was going to say that's my number one as well. And I think that, again, it's come from a lesson you taught me when I was a kid. But just as soon as you think about that race day, it's just instant motivation. It's like a little secret pill, and it's like a motivational.
That's a good way of putting it. It's like taking an injection of stimulus.
When you're at a conflict, do I do it or do I not? When you have to make a decision about what's going to be best for my preparation and what's not. As soon as you think about how am I going to feel the night before the race, how am I going to feel the morning of, how am I going to feel when I'm starting or in the race.
That whole week, the build-up, when you start thinking about the race, why did I only do 4 long runs instead of the 10 he told me to do?
Yeah.
Why did I do 3 endurance rides instead of the 75 I was supposed to do?
Yeah.
You're just kicking yourself that whole week. It's so disappointing. And I just try to avoid. I don't want to feel like that. I want to get there knowing that, I've done everything in my power here, and whatever happens on race day, I know that I've prepared as well as I can, and it might not still pan out the way I want to, but at least I know I've given it everything. But if you get there on race day and you have a crap day, you know why.
Yeah. But agreed, it's my absolute number one, and it never fails to give you a little surge of just, I know what to do now. Yeah, because you really think about that day. It really builds up something inside of you, and that's obviously also the value of having a goal, because if you've got that goal, you can think about that.
Yeah, but if you don't have that goal, and you're just meandering along, aren't you? You can't use that tactic.
Yeah, exactly.
Because my goal is to be better. Well, that's a great goal. I'm really happy with that goal. I'm not dismissing that. But be better when?
It does make it easier to give into a session.
I'll be better next week.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a good point, because I actually mentioned this today to someone as well, was when someone says to me, I'm having a bad week, I'll just start again on Monday. Well, good on you, for it's Tuesday. Let's just waste 5 days in preparation and you've now lost.
Yeah.
What about you just start again now?
Yeah.
And get your mindset right. And, that's a famous word. I'm gonna go and get your shoes on and go and do the session.
Yeah.
What's stopping you now?
Yeah.
Oh, just laziness.
Yeah.
But I'll start better on Monday. No, you can keep doing that and keep starting on Monday. Don't be that person. If you're having a bad trot, don't make the consistency worse by adding 5 more days to your bad trot that you've just had.
Mm-hmm.
It could be legitimate reasons why you've had 3 days off. But don't make it 8. Make it 3 and start again.
Yeah. One of the only last ones I had was, meeting up with people, like you spoke about, even if you're not meeting up with them in real life, meeting up with them virtually or just training at the same time. I know my other 2 brothers have used that before. They text each other and say, do you want to get on, just for a bit of motivation? And they'll chat on the phone while they're doing an easy ride, just doesn't make a difference not riding together, but that's a time they're setting aside to talk and pedal at the same time. And I found that effective for my easy runs. Just organising to meet up with someone just gives you that motivation for the easy, slow run, or joining a group for your hard sessions.
Yeah, I just think they're the obvious ones that we haven't even talked about, and they should be the ones you go to straight away. There's always going to be a conflict whether the people you're going to train with are doing what you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that's why that's hard.
Yeah. So what do we do there? Well, my message, and I've had this conversation so many times with the athletes I coach. Oh, but I want to ride with this guy on Monday. I say, absolutely, go with him, and explain to him that you've invested in a coach, and this is where you're at with your program, and he doesn't have a coach, and he's just doing a random "what'll I do today" session, which is normal. Wake up, what'll I do today? I'll just do a recovery. I'll ring Joe, and we'll do a recovery ride together. But as I get out there, I might just go harder, and that's his program. Whereas you can say to him straight from the outset, look, today we're going to do recovery. We're not going to go over 190 watts, no matter what. So if you're happy with that, then let's go.
Yeah.
And during the ride, he'll say, well, we talked about that, but that doesn't count. And all of a sudden, just let him go, and you stay with your 190 watts. And all of a sudden, he will join you. Believe it or not, that's what will happen. So you have to be selective, and you have to make it clear from the outset, be transparent. This is what I'm doing today. And if it's a hard day and they want to join you, great, join in. But this is the session I'm doing. And every time I do a hard section, I'll come back towards you or work it out. If we ride the hills and someone's really at a less standard than you are, when if you're doing 4 hill repeats, you get to the top of the hill, you ride back down and you join them and ride back to the top of the hill with them, and then you go on the journey. So there's lots of little tactics that you can use. As a runner, if you're running with someone who's too good for you and you're doing a hard session that's similar to what you want to do, then that's actually okay. As long as it's got a similarity that you can say, well, I'm trying to get 3, 4, 5-minute efforts here, or 30-second efforts, or 2-minute efforts, depending on what your session is. And if they're running too hard for you, great, just do your version. But you're still in with the group, and you've still got that camaraderie, teamwork. That you're sharing pain with others. That feels like it's okay. When you're sharing it by yourself, you're looking around going, whoa, how hard is this? But using groups and friendships, I think, is great as long as you can not compromise your program. That's the key underwriter there. That the minute you start doing that, you might as well not be on the program, because you're just doing the sheep program.
Yeah, I guess that summarizes some good tactics. One last thing I wanted to clarify. We touched on it really briefly before when you said, this is not my philosophy, but I text someone the 7 green ticks. I wanted to clarify that, because it is a big part of your coaching philosophy that you're not there to motivate people.
Absolutely. That's not my job. I want people who are on the same page as me, who have a desire and a passion to reach a goal. And my job as a coach is to help them do the right sessions, have the program spread out correctly, and make sure that they're riding in the right power ranges, make sure that their heart rate is appropriate, that they're riding at the right cadence, that they're getting the tactics of the race, that they're learning how to execute, etc., etc. Motivating them is not my job. Don't come to me if you need someone to motivate. Go to somewhere else, because you will be motivated by the passion that I've got invested in you. But I'm not going to spend time talking you into training. That's what we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And that's not what I see my role is.
Yeah, and that's why you were happy to send that little text, because it's a little tactic, that
Yes.
little help, but it's not you creating the intrinsic motivation in them, because that's not your philosophy. You won't do that.
No, it's just telling them they're on a good journey. And it's a motivator in a different method, but it's not me ringing up saying, "Come on, Jordan, I know you need to train here. Come on, you can do it." I'm not that coach.
Yep. Good way to finish off. It's been a big podcast. Thank you very much for listening. It's been hopefully one that can help you train when you don't feel like it. That's it from us. We'll see you next episode.